Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this panel on From Hype to Reality, Practical Implications of AI Transformation. We do have a great panel here to address some really interesting issues and questions in the area of AI hype and practical implementation. So before we do intros, I just want to mention that the opinions expressed are of the panelists themselves, not of their employers. So we'll go ahead and do a quick round of intros, starting with Vijay.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Vijay Antonyraj. I'm leading data analytics. I work for Equifax. I lead D2C consumer business.
Oh, yes. My name is Rosalia Ungaraza, and I work for Baptist Health, South Florida. And I am AVP of AI. I lead the entire AI program at Baptist Health. I've been in AI for over 15 years in different capacities as an individual contributor, then as a manager, and now I lead the program. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Rick Hinton. I'm the VP of Analytics Strategy and Transformation at Elder Research. So my job is helping businesses actually adopt the cool things that we build. So looking forward to the panel discussion today.
Hey everybody, pleasure to be here. My name is Mabby. I'm the enterprise head of enterprise data and analytics at Norfolk Southern. For those of you that might not be familiar with what we do, we are one of the largest railroads in the United States. We move about 150,000 rail cars a day. We ship anything and everything from raw material to finished products. So think of lumber, steel, all the way to BMWs, UPS packages, and the equipment for the Department of Defense. Pleasure to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Great, and I am Faizan Javed. I'm the moderator of this panel. I lead data science and engineering at Kaiser Permanente. So I want to start off with the question about AI hype, right? And I think this week was interesting because we just saw that the Nobel Prize winners of physics and chemistry were, again, awarded to some world-class AI researchers. So that, to me, seems like the AI hype is still building. So I want to start off with a question by asking the panel that, what's the most common gap that you have seen in terms of the promise of AI, the AI hype, versus the real implications, right? So can we discuss any issues here? Go ahead.
I know it's going to sound cliche, data quality. I think that is going to be the basic foundation for any successful AI implementation. Having a clean process label available data, it's going to be one of the critical things. And also we could all, I mean, since I'm in modeling world, I could easily understand that's becoming a major challenge. And the next most important thing is I work for Equifax, so we have to be bound within the ethical and the data governance side. From a bias perspective, from a privacy and compliance. And to me, like these two are very top two categories where it's going to be really challenging from a pilot testing all the way to taking to production.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think I can add to that just, what can AI do? Right, there's a lot of misconception of what AI can do and what AI cannot do, what we want it to do versus what it was created and the limitations that it has. And I think that's one of the issues between having that AI hype and actually the reality of AI. And I think, if I were to just step forward and think, okay, so how do we solve that? It would basically be, providing AI literacy, so that people actually understand the difference between what we think AI can, and also even the worries that people have, right? We have different employees from a number of companies having strikes because of AI, that misconception, that hype. And so I think AI literacy is one of the ways to deal with this hype issue.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think when we talk about the hype, I think we're talking about generative AI in the last 18 months to 24 months. And within our clients, it's interesting because we've seen run the gamut, where there's complete skeptics in one business unit, and the other is really hyped about it. And the challenge we have, particularly with generative AI and implementing it within the business, is generative AI is really a general purpose technology. And the way adoption happens is integration with business processes. And so that's what we're seeing is what are the use cases, trying to find the specific use cases and even a level lower below use case, which is what are the specific tasks? Because we talk a lot about the machine and human interaction. So when we say use case, it's oftentimes it's like AI can cover a couple of those tasks, but we've got to understand how it works in the processes and workflows. So.
Yeah, I would just go back to the Nobel Prize because I need to say it. Congrats to Jeffrey Hinton for winning that Nobel Prize. I'm a huge
No
fan
relation, by the way.
Huge fan of him and his work. And I think without him, we probably wouldn't be here with deep neural networks and the dropout and everything that he introduced. I should say, I mean, building on what you were saying earlier, I kind of feel like with AI, we had a lot of success, we had a lot of production, implementations, and the way we really went by it was, okay, what kind of business problem are you trying to solve, and start with the what, and then make your way backwards, as opposed to, I think with the hype around generative AI, a lot of times I get asked the question that, hey, I really want a chatbot. Can you figure out where I can embed this chatbot in the business? And I asked them a question, do you have a specific business problem that you're trying to solve? Or you really want to jump on the bandwagon and say, Norfolk Southern is also doing generative AI. So to your point about the business use case, I think it is extremely important to start there and answer the what and why you're trying to solve a particular business problem, and then figure out how you're going to solve that business problem, whether it's generative AI or traditional AI, or for the matter, maybe a simple dashboard.
Yeah, those are all like great points. And then once again, I want to bring up that AI is not new, right? So I've seen that over the past 20, 30 years, we go through these cycles of hype. So there was, once again, when, as Mabby mentioned, there was this period where deep learning was everything. Right? Oh, let's do deep learning this, deep learning that, and let's shove these models into some use. So it's the same problem coming up again when nowadays, thanks to, as Rick mentioned, the Gen AI hype, right? I mean, it's not hype, I think it's actually useful. But because of the Gen AI advances made in NLP and AI, people are once again seeing what's possible. And I think there's some element of fear of being left out, right?
Yeah.
That the companies don't want to be left out of this potentially innovative force. So I think it's a positive for us who are in this field where I think most likely our board members are asking or giving us more funds for this. But going back to what both Rick and Mabby mentioned, working backwards from the use cases. But Adoye, go ahead. Go ahead, Vijay.
I mean, I think the way to think about this is, I think we need to educate even our leaders for that matter. It is not about, like, every initiative is not going to bring in a revenue from the implement. They can be tangible as well as intangible benefits by doing this. And as Mabby was saying, like, it is all about the use case, what you're trying to solve, and how your current system is behaving. You need to do a gap analysis before you say, okay, let's go do this because everybody is doing it. I mean, I don't think we need to have that kind of pressure, like, okay, everyone is jumping in, okay, we should also do it. Because it has a lot of potential, which means that you also need to be more responsible using this kind of technology. And you need to work within your guardrails to make sure what it means. And you need to have specific AI, like how to measure it, like once you implement AI. I think the measuring part is also going to be very critical. And the way you set up your KPIs, and you can always start something small, and then you scale up big. So it's not something like you need to take a long-term project and try, because in this hype, what I'm seeing is, we're not hearing about like the many AI initiative which got failed. Everything we talked about is, oh, this has improved this has improved that. But again, the businesses should be ready to pivot if your AI model is not working. You need to stop it. You should have you need to have the courage to abandon it if it's not doing what exactly you're trying to do. And I think it's going to be a learning curve, and it has to be a collaboration effort. It's just not some great AI scientist and expertise, but you still need to have your business partners along with you, your data engineers and your quality engineers. It has to be a cross-collaboration effort, and that's very critical to have a successful model.
Yeah, actually, I would like to add to that in terms of making sure that you have that use case. It's also that use case has to align with your business strategy, because especially in my experience, right, everybody these days wakes up with an AI idea, especially Gen AI, because you hear it everywhere. You know, your friends have done it, this other business has done it, then you have the senior leaders who have also heard it from some conference, some executive roundtable. So at the end of the day, you know, especially as AI leaders, we have to figure out, okay, so what are we going to build? How are we going to use our resources effectively and make sure that, one, what we're building aligns with our enterprise business strategy, and two, yes, we want to do these MVPs, right? You want to build quickly, so that you can do a lot of experiments that way and figure out whether it works or it doesn't work. And also, along that process, figure out ROI, right? So we're not just building anything and everything just because you heard about it, blah, 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 but we're actually trying to build things that will meet the bottom line while also innovating, right? So it's definitely very important to make sure that you align with your enterprise business strategy.
No, that's a great point. And getting back to the hype, you know, this is the first time in my career I've ever seen like the CEOs of organizations saying, how fast can we move? We need this. Yeah. And then everyone in the organization is just wide-eyed. We don't know where to begin with this. And so a lot of what we talk about with our clients is building the business transformation capability actually into the data analytics organization, where it's got to be a muscle you exercise. It has to be a capability in and of itself, because as Rosalie was saying, that all of those things determine the alignment with strategy, determine the ROI, building in change management, program management, all of those things have largely, in the past, have been outside of the data analytics team capabilities. But what's happening now is the organization is looking at data analytics and saying, how do we make this happen? In partnership with IT, obviously. But building, you know, that specific investments in people and transformation is what we're seeing as the requirements to stay relevant in this.
Yeah, I think Rick, you're making a really good point about the CEOs asking for it. And I would argue that, you know, the good thing about Gen AI, it was a curse and a blessing for us, because prior to that, a lot of people heard about AI, they never worked with it, they had a conceptual, like, you know, understanding of what AI is, but I think with ChatGPT, as they started working, like, you know, themselves with the, you know, chatbot and interacting with it, they realized the potential. And that's why now we're getting asked, okay, how can I go faster? But as a result of that, I think sometimes we forget about the basic fundamentals of any project that you start. I mean, to her point, you need to start asking about the ROIs, what you're trying to solve, and none of that means that this is not a priority or it shouldn't be done. It's just that you need to make sure that you're taking very meticulous steps to ultimately drive towards that business strategy, something that supports your corporate strategy, and not something that it's cool, it's a chatbot, and I spent $1 million on it, but I got very little value, but a lot of fanfare. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think those are all great points, because, you know, at the executive sponsor level, especially at the funding level, it's really important to tie your use cases into the overall business strategy and to show the value, right? Like, why are we doing this? To basically answer the question, so what? Why are we doing this? Why do we want to spend money? And I think, you know, right now we still know that many technology departments, they have some funding issues, budget cuts. So this point becomes even more important, to make sure that anything that the team is proposing ties into your corporate strategy, business strategy, to show value. I want to dig a level deeper, right? So assuming that this part is sorted out for your AI transformation, what are the other challenges that you may face while you are trying to implement it? And I think Vijay actually mentioned something about data quality, right? Because it's basically the foundation. So if you want to expand on that, or if the panelists want to share any other challenges that may come into play while you're trying to implement AI applications or Gen AI applications, right?
I can go first.
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to build on the fact that, yeah, you need to have a robust data foundation. And I always say, without a good data foundation, you're not going to have, I mean, the whole garbage in, garbage out, we've all heard about it. And it's reality. I mean, you can throw Gen AI on top of your data, and we hear that a lot, that, hey, I have this solution, it's running on AWS, GCP, throw it at your data, it's going to be great. I mean, the outcome is not there. and I think we all have witnessed that. But the other part that I'm going to touch on is that it's very different, when you're working with an idea or prototype as opposed to trying to scale that enterprise-wide or taking it to production. A lot of factors come into play. You really need good talent that understands how these models work. We've had instances where we had great success with prototypes. We put it in production. We've started seeing model drifts, data drifts. Essentially, the models were good for a period of time, but they started really drifting and not being as effective as what we had witnessed before. So you're really having robust frameworks and talent that can apply those frameworks correctly and put them in place to make sure that whatever you're putting in production is something that is reliable, it's effective, it can scale, and it can be as accurate as what you witness, at least in the long term. And it's not something that it's a flashy object, because one thing that I've noticed is that you lose your business partner's confidence very quickly. If you put something in production that's good for 10 days and then it starts fizzling out. So I would say talent, data, and then really ensuring that you have proper ML ops, data ops, and whatnot around it once you put it in production.
Yeah, I mean, I can add to everything you said. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. Add to that AI governance, especially in industries that are highly regulated, like the one that I'm in, healthcare. You have the existing regulations, and now with AI, and especially Gen AI, that we barely understand and barely have figured out how to, I guess the best word here is govern it, protecting our patients, protecting the business, security, just, infrastructure security. So, it is a challenge now. And also AI governance is changing fast I think all of AI, regulations are coming up, not just in the US, but worldwide. So how do you keep up with those? So that is definitely a challenge right now. And how do you make it such that you're not hampering innovation? The more regulations you put in, the slower everything else, becomes. So how do you balance the two? Allow people to experiment, allow people to invent new things, but at the same time, protect patients, protect the business, and all those things.
I mean, the way I see it is, how do you integrate with your existing system as well? Because your model can work good in a pilot space, in a very controlled way, and you need to make sure you're integrating with your existing software platforms to make sure it has a seamless integration. And on top of that, as Mabby was saying, we need to train the model so it can take this real-time inputs which is coming from outside, and it gets, it has to be, we have to keep that space, and we have to budget that as well, so that it's just not like you build a model, you throw it out there, it's going to give you results, but it can be impacted by what is happening outside from the real experiences, the way the market is behaving, so the way customers are behaving, and then the model can drift by that matter. So how do you make sure you have this? You need to have a continuous adaptability and learning process in place whenever you move this to production, and that is something like, it's going to be a challenge, but you still need to have infrastructure in place to have that kind of, the loop to come back in, and the model gets updated as and when new information is flowing in real time.
Yeah, I would second the governance aspect to this, and part of it is trying to figure out in advance where you're going to meet pockets of resistance. And one is obvious, like when in our client I work with was the general counsel's office was a pocket of resistance related to exposing company data to outside their firewall. So CISO, general counsel's office, that would be a pocket of resistance. And also, I think it also gets to managing expectations of the C-suite about what is actually possible, to getting back to your point, because that hype factor is pretty high. And then alignment with the businesses, and that's great, you want to do these things. Here's what we should anticipate and expect to in a sense, tamp down the expectations. But it's also you're kind of building a dialogue with them on here's how it's going to work going forward. And the huge challenge, to your point, was about not tampering the excitement and enthusiasm that, hey, we can innovate and we can do cool things. But it's like, how do you build the processes and the governance, but build it in a way that doesn't hamper innovation, like you were saying. It's like, how can we move quickly, but still, mitigate risk?
Yeah. I mean, that's like, I would summarize that as the art of the possible, right? Basically, like what's possible. And I think if I summarize all the points from the panelists, so at this a second level of transformation, I would say that like we actually need to gauge and see where we stand internally, right? Because like if your executive sponsor just saw an article about what Google did, they may come to you and say, okay, if Google can do it, why can't we do it, right? That may sound silly, but that's an actual thing that may happen because, in terms of the technical implementation, it may not be realistic. So the best practice, if I summarize, is to understand where you stand currently, because not every organization may be at the same level of maturity, right? It's possible that in some organization, you may be at stage one. You may want to focus on data quality, building data governance, and also the risk management and everything, right? I mean, you can't just jump and start building applications if you don't have that foundation in place. Or while in some other organization, you may already have that, but you might need to focus on infrastructure, cloud systems to scale it up. While in some of the more mature organizations like big tech, you can just step in, they have everything ready for you, and you can start focusing on building models for application users. So I think you may have to gauge which stage of maturity your organization is in, and then take those steps accordingly to build or drive the data strategy or the AI strategy, right? So that's where some of the challenges come in. I do want to dig into one point that I think, like Rosalia mentioned, which was risk management, ethics bias that come into healthcare. And of course, I'm also in healthcare, so I do understand what she's saying. But basically, what are the panelists' thoughts on responsible AI, how important that is, especially in this hyped up age of AI?
So the way we are doing it is, we have formed an AI compliance and ethics framework. There is a council committee now, which is accessing all these different use cases, which is getting implemented across different units within our organization. And they try to understand like what exactly we're trying to do, and they are trying to put this guardrail saying that, we don't want to end up with any lawsuits coming against us, so we have to be responsible. And we want to make sure the model is not biased, it's not discriminating any offer. It should be available for everybody. And I know it depends upon the organization, and there can be some small companies might not have a budget to have a council in place, but I strongly recommend to have a council which analyzes all these different use cases and come with best practices, because this is still a learning curve. I don't think we are there yet. It's everybody is still learning, and it's definitely good to have a council. I think from a governance perspective, from a framework, from an ethics perspective, it's really important.
Yeah, so we have a similar idea in place. We have an enterprise-wide AI governance council. It's made up of members from all our functional units. We try to have as much representation across the business. So supply chain, finance, clinical, and what have you. Their job is first, it's a new council, so we're working things out. But ideally, when everything is working out, their job will be to evaluate all ideas. So if somebody has an idea or has a product they want to bring in that has AI in there, they will be responsible in terms of approving it. Then when we build internally, because we have an internal AI development team, after the pilot, they will again review it for bias and fairness and all other issues that we have. We're following the NIST AI playbook right now. In healthcare, we also have CHAI that also is providing some guidance in terms of responsible AI, and then we have TRAIN. So we're part of all of those organizations. But anyway, so using that, we evaluate those pilots, and then also for vendors, same story. This council will be approving any vendor products that have AI. And then, of course, once something is in production, this council will be responsible in terms of auditing those products. So are they still functioning as they're supposed to? Do they need to be decommissioned because they are failing to meet expected ROI? Or do we need to improve them because they're still useful, but they're underperforming? So that's basically the role of our council.
And then before we move to Rick, no, I was saying just since you actually brought up Gen AI, right? And responsible AI is not new. It's been there for a while. So, I mean, just an open question, are there any specific or new risks with Gen AI that makes responsible AI more important now? Or, I mean, just like is it a bigger risk in terms of fairness, bias, or like
Well,
what's bringing in?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes, just because it's kind of an open frontier and you know, brand new vendors with brand new models and it's basically untested at this point. So it's very much, and what's really interesting and surprising is the willingness of companies to start to explore it, which is really exacerbating the whole governance and risk and everything. It's making that like 10x. So that is real, and you know that's a business risk that it's interesting companies are starting to take. I think one of the things is that we're emphasizing more in the work we do with our clients is also going out and prioritizing, because what we're seeing is just a flood of new ideas, new technologies. So how do we sort these out and start to do some real honest prioritization before it starts to overload these risk committees, which are essential. So that's just one thing.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing that you mentioned, because like I can think of with traditional machine learning models, with computer vision models, you can't understand how they're being trained on your data. I mean, you can, even deep neural networks, it's kind of impossible to totally understand, but you can go and look at every layer. You can understand the backprop, even though like it's a humongous like cardinality. But what's pretty interesting with Gen AI and the LLMs that are out there, even the ones that are open source like Llama, nobody knows what data they've been trained on. Nobody knows how they've been trained. Nobody knows what kind of prompt engineering happened. And we are very quick to jump on it and say, yeah, I want to try it for my use cases as well. So I certainly think that there's risk involved. I think that said, there's always, it's kind of like, legal department always tells you no. Security always tells you no. But you need to make the most balanced decision for the business at the end of the day, which is a balance between what you're trying to achieve, the capability, and the risk. I do think risks are involved, but I think to a great extent you can mitigate that with the approach that you'd be taking in implementing these solutions.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And then one thing I want to bring up is that in the case of responsible AI for Gen AI, right? One thing that's different is the generative part, that we can create stuff now. These newer models can hallucinate. They can make things up, which can be very dangerous in some areas like healthcare, right? For example, if you have a model that just gives fake answers to questions, to healthcare questions. So that's, I think we may need more safeguards for those use cases where you're using Gen AI models to create artificial content, right? So I think hallucinations is a big problem. And that's where I think the responsible AI space is expanding further to take that into account. So sticking with the implementation phase of the transformation, Mabby, you actually mentioned talent, right? Talent is, of course, a big part of this equation as well. And I think most companies in the world can't hire all the best AI talent, right? Especially with their pay packages. I think it's very hard to compete with OpenAI or Google or DeepMind or what have you. So how can we tackle that problem?
Gosh, if I tell everybody my secret, then I can't hire my talent.
That's why you have the crowds over
I
here.
would say I'd take a stab at it. Hopefully it's not a cop-out answer, but I'd tell you the elements that everybody pretty much follows. I mean, you really ultimately need to make sure that you have exciting use cases and problems that you're trying to solve. I think in my mind, the environment is quite important for people. What kind of inclusive environment you're creating for people to be themselves and be able to ideate. So I think that really plays a role. Technology plays a role. If you're using a technology that's outdated, folks that are graduating from, Georgia Tech for the matter, or GSU and whatnot, they're not going to be very crazy about working for your company if you're using outdated technology. And a big part of it is quite honestly, you mentioned, I mean, the compensation also plays a role. So, but in my mind, it's not one lever that you can pull. It's a combination of these factors. And to me, you cannot really have a successful AI program without the right talent that's going to support it. Back in the day, everything was 20 lines of code for calling a model. Right now, it's one line of code. Everybody knows how to code. Everybody knows, even using ChatGPT, how to invoke any model. But I think what becomes important is that, are you applying it the right way? Do you understand what's under the hood? Do you understand how you're solving this problem? So that you ultimately, again, make sure that whatever you're creating is a sustainable solution for the business, and it's not some teleport machine that you show them on a PowerPoint and you put in production and it works for a day, and then it won't work anymore. So I guess those are my recipes for hiring talent. I left out the secret one, so you can't really follow my recipe.
Any of the strategies that the panelists want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you said. But on top of that, at least the ones that we have employed is one, upskilling our own workforce. So there are people who are not right now in the AI team who would love to do AI.
Yes.
So we try to sort of bring them in for different projects. And the same thing with people in AI who want to do something, say, in data and what have you. So that, and then also our own AI team, giving them opportunities to upskill themselves. But another option, if you can't have your own FTEs, is to have consultants. So bring in vendors that actually provide this kind of services, maybe short-term contracts where they build out a solution for you, and then use that during that phase, use that time to upskill your own team as they're watching what the vendor teams are doing.
So we recently hired a chief AI officer. I think it's his problem now. But the point is, the way I think about this is, yes, it is a challenge because it's high paying. It's going to hit your budget for sure. But I strongly agree to what you're saying. We should be treating like any other technology. Like, yes, of course, consultants are there. You should, from a long-term perspective, you need to groom your talent internally. And again, modeling is not new to Equifax, so we have a wide range of it. But yes, on this specific space, we definitely need to step up, and you need to internally start training, and he has a list of programs the AI officer has put together now. So I think in a short term, yes, this might be a problem, but I don't think in a long term this should be fine. I believe it's going to be like any other technology, and we should be able to overcome this.
Yeah, I think that the critical thing that is building in learning as part of this transformation. I mean, the thing we talk about is mindsets and skill sets. Yeah. I mean, as we kind of look into this next phase, it's pretty unsettling for a lot of employees. And so the way we look at it is get them in the right mindset about, you're going to be part of this future, but you have to back it up with learning and that's embedded in the work that they do, and clearly defining what's the strategy and how does that impact the way that we're working, and then follow that up with a very disciplined program around learning. That way you keep everybody aligned and moving forward. And also it gets to the upskilling aspect to this. It's like the best thing you could do is upskill your own people. And that's a lot.
Yeah, I just want to add one more point. Yes, there is going to be cultural resistance. I think the change management is going to be difficult. I think people might be nervous when you're talking about this, like, whether they're going to replace the jobs or something. But I think as leaders, I think we need to educate them, explaining like this is going to be an enablement to the jobs, and this is where we can use that time in much more better way. And this is I think as leaders we have to calm down the workforce what we have and start training them, upskilling it, and explaining and giving them exposure to what exactly it means. Because I think down the line, once we start implementing this, the cultural resistance is something I think we have to handle it. And it's going to be a major factor down the line. So upskill the existing workforce will be a better option for that.
Yeah, I think Vijay, you just brought up another great point. But I just want to summarize the talent discussion, which is like, as the panelists mentioned, it's going to be an all-of-the-above strategy, right? We'll have to actually upskill, make sure that because it's easy to upskill engineers to become data scientists than nurses to become data scientists, right? So there's a gap. we have to be realistic, like who can be upskilled much easily, right? So you can't say, oh, I have this partner who's an accountant and that person wants to be an AI scientist. Well, that may take some time. So upskilling is a strategy, partnerships with academia and vendors, right, as Mabby mentioned. That's another strategy that we can take into account. And then, of course, like I view this like as sports teams, right? So I think if anyone here follows Spanish league football, we have 2 teams there. I don't want to offend Spanish football fans here, but we have a team, you may know Barcelona, which does really well. They have key superstars and they bring up talent, right? Yeah. And then we have Real Madrid that just buys up talent, right? Yeah. So it's up to you, like how you want to proceed. If you have the budget, you can be Real Madrid, or you can be Barcelona if you can upskill. So it's always like you will have some key superstars. I believe that at every company, there are always going to be some key stars, and then how do you build them up, supplement them with upcoming talent, right? So in case we have Real Madrid fans here, I still love Real Madrid. So.
Just going to say it's the New York
Just
Yankees.
saying that
Baseball, it's New York Yankees.
It's more safe here to say here than in Europe, right? I can't complain about Real Madrid. So I want to move on to the next step. So now we have in the third stage. So I think let me do a time check. Yeah, I want to talk about actual use cases. So if you can share any actual success use cases. I know that we've been discussing the strategy and how to do things, but there have been some successes across industries. So if you can share any use cases, either from your company if you can, or from your industry, that you think have been big successes.
I could think of, so the one thing which we did is the fraud monitoring. Since the identity theft is becoming a major concern, and with a lot of breaches happening almost every other week, the risk monitoring and the fraud detection is something we are investing a lot. And also, yesterday we had an AI expo in our office, and we were, and there was a demo exactly like how the team is building this and how it's going to be put into use. And also, I think in a larger perspective, we can start thinking of AI as a service where you can start exposing to outside world. But I think the one which really fascinated me was the fraud and the risk monitoring AI model which was built was really good from our use case perspective.
Back you go. Yeah, so in healthcare, honestly, healthcare has been using AI for years now. So they're the old stuff, like in the radiology department, all the AI for reading images and stuff like that. But I actually love the latest one with Gen AI, and that's ambient listening. I wouldn't say it's a major success, but I love how it has great potential. So it's ambient listening, we call it that way, but it's really the technology where you go see your doctor, and usually when you're done with your conversation with your doctor, they have to write up a note and put it in your EHR. And that tends to be a lot of administrative work for doctors, and they're getting tired of that. And it's sort of like stuff that if they didn't have to do it, that would be the way they would like to work. So that way they can have more time with the patient rather than rushing so they can write the note. So now Gen AI has been used to, first we record the conversation between the doctor and the patient, and then we transcribe it, of course, into text, and then we use Gen AI to write the doctor's notes. And so now the doctor doesn't have to write the first draft. He still has to review the note, right? Before putting it in the EHR. So I think that's a fantastic, again, I'm not saying success because the adoption has been sort of 50-50. Some doctors love it, some not so much because it's not as accurate as you want it, but at the same time, it does show potential. So I love that one.
Yeah, one example that comes to mind is we do a fair amount of work in the consumer packaged goods area. And we ran a Microsoft Copilot program over the last just about a year now across different business functions, deployment of Copilot and all the Office applications and so forth. And they were measuring user adoption and the use cases and everything else. It was interesting to see it play out in that the highest adoption was in the marketing function, that the brand managers were using it. And we're using it, think for creative briefs and for writing ad copy. And we saw a lot of adoption there. So it was interesting, the creative aspect of Gen AI, in particular Copilot, had a much stronger adoption across the business units. And it was about, daily monthly usage was about 2/3 of this population. So the control, or the group was about 300 users. So the creative aspect was kind of a surprise in terms of the application of it. And then the other thing that we found was exactly that. Our consultants were part of the program, and we're using transcription to do, when they do interviews and requirements gathering and everything else, we're using Gen A to capture those, turn it into notes that the technical team can use. So it cut out a lot of meetings between all the teams. Small sample size, but it's pretty encouraging if you think about it going forward. So.
Yeah, in our space, the one that has given us huge dividends in terms of safety and productivity, it's in the news actually. I would welcome you to Google digital train inspections at Norfolk Southern. Effectively, we are using AI to inspect trains, and I'll give you a little bit of background on that. So kind of like your packages that you send, from here, say, to Seattle, via UPS or FedEx, and it goes through multiple sorting facilities. Trains kind of operate the same way, so rail cars go through different sorting facilities as they go in their journey. And at every sorting facility, or what we call yard, you got to inspect these trains. We are very heavy on inspection because we want to make sure that we have a safe operation. And the inspection process, it is actually 2 people, one on each side of a particular train, walking along a 2 to 3 mile long train, and they need to visually look at every single rail car and inspect them for somewhere around 350 different things that can go on. This bolt is loose, this nut is missing, you name it. So what we did, we rolled out trackside cameras. These are kind of like your traffic cameras that look at your license plate, but in our case, it's a 25 megapixel camera at 70 miles per hour, and they give you this 360 imagery of every train that passes by at 70 miles per hour. So we don't even need to slow the train down. Operations as usual, as the trains are passing, you're basically collecting about on average 1,000 pictures of every single rail car. And then we use AI to do the same thing, find those missing bolts and nuts and whatnot. We have about 60 algorithms in production right now, so within a matter of minutes of any train passing, it automatically runs, it finds the emerging conditions very fast, and it goes as far as automatically generating work orders. So you get on your tablet or iPhone or whatnot that, hey, there's this rail car, here's this picture, here's the particular imaging condition on this rail car, go inspect it. And for us, it's really turning the finders of those defects, our car inspectors, to actual fixers of those defects. So huge productivity gain, huge safety play, and we are rolling these out across our network to pretty much inspect 95% of our traffic on an annual basis. And yeah, it's a really cool story. I highly recommend you guys Googling that.
Yeah, I think those are all like really great use cases. I just want to bring one point up, is that sometimes in organizations, right, there's always a discussion of budgets. So usually AI projects are more resource intensive than your typical software engineering projects. They require more resources, bigger budgets. So I think it's actually really important to be aware of that as well and to make a case, right? I mean, if you have a use case where you may want to invest $5 million for your AI project, but the ROI is less than $5 million, even though it might be cool and fun, you may not get the go ahead, right? So I think budgets, so we have to make sure that the stakeholders are aware that it's going to cost this much XYZ, and usually you'll find that AI projects are more resource intensive than your software engineering projects, right? Great, so I think we are at time. So I would like to thank the panel for their great insights and comments across all stages of the AI transformation, all the way from executive sponsorship to implementation challenges to ROI calculations to use cases. I thought it was great. I also learned a few things, and I hope the audience enjoyed this discussion, and hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.